I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure what your position on this is.
The whole idea that like Zack Snyder fundamentally misunderstands Superman. He's looking at Superman as if an alien landed on Earth and humans found out about it.
Right.
And how they would react. And also how that alien would experience being an alien amongst men with tremendous superpowers. That's how he understands Superman.
I mean...
And so for somebody to be like, he fundamentally misunderstands Superman, it's like, that's because you fundamentally believe that the only thing Superman seems to represent is truth, justice, the American way.
Right.
And not the fact that this is literally a person with superhuman powers walking around who can shoot lasers out of his freaking eyes. Like, that's scary. Like, that's not like, oh, America, truth, justice. That's like, he's shooting lasers. Like he can just... All
right. You've lost me. So we're talking about Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice.
Yeah.
And so let me get this straight. You hated it.
No, I did not hate it.
I hated it?
Did you hate it?
I didn't hate it.
Did you think it was... Okay, let me understand this then. I'm sure you thought it was the greatest movie that's ever happened.
Oh, no, of course not.
Oh, well...
What else is there?
That's true.
There's possibly be something else.
Either a movie is an affront to the very basic notion of geek culture, that's a direct quote, or it's the greatest superhero movie of all time.
But I've never seen anyone say that.
Which one? The greatest superhero movie of all time?
Who said that?
I'm sure some random person on Twitter is claiming that.
Okay, well, it's not. This is what Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice is. It's a movie about Batman fighting Superman.
Right.
And then some justice is dawned.
Towards the end.
Yeah.
Towards the end.
In the middle with some video footage, which I guess people have an issue with how that was done. I guess they wanted more of like vague hints at the Flash or less vague hints at the Flash, somewhere in between. Like whatever like representation of the Flash and Aquaman were in this film was either too much or not enough.
Right. I will say this though, and this is legitimate. There was not enough of Wonder Woman's theme music in this movie. Because that theme music is truly remarkable.
It was great.
That
was great. Like that's the thing. Let's just go through. Like here's a couple things that I thought this movie did great.
Tell me what you thought was great, Cody.
Wonder Woman's theme music.
That was so great.
Was great. Ben Affleck as Batman.
That was also great.
I thought he was great. I thought he was believable. I actually saw an article, again, because we're going to go into how so many articles are just taking every opportunity to like tear apart everything.
Yeah.
That said that Ben Affleck was actually too big to be Batman because he was about an inch bigger than Adam West and the comic book Batman. Because apparently Adam West and comic book Batman are the same size.
Because that matters.
I guess that's the only time that film portrayals have been right is with Adam West, according to this chart. That I saw. So Ben Affleck was too big, so he lumbered around his fight scenes. Lumbered. He was lumbering, the lumbering Batman, because of his size. And I just can't disagree with that more.
Okay.
I thought the fact that he was a big guy was
very Batman.
Very Batman.
One might say.
Yeah,
so you like the theme music.
I like the theme.
You liked Ben Affleck as Batman. What else did you like?
I didn't hate Henry Cavill.
Yeah, I think that's a fair...
he's kind of stiff. But the thing is that Superman's just kind of stiff.
I remember there's this one moment, if I could interject, when he's like talking to his mom, and she kind of has this really interesting, but also like kind of weird, like, why would his mom say that? Yeah. When she's like, be their hero, be their whatever, but you know what? You don't owe them anything. And I was a little like, that's conflicting. Like, yeah. But it's funny because Henry Cavill's, standing very Superman, and he's like got the chest like, the size of whatever.
Yeah.
And when she's saying that, she's giving the speech, he kind of looks at her like this. Like he has like this bewildered, like, and I was like, I feel like maybe that is a Zack Snyder thing. Like maybe he's not quite getting.
I do think Henry Cavill plays Superman as slightly confused most of the time. But the thing is, I actually think that's perfectly relevant to how Zack Snyder is portraying Superman altogether, which is that he's an alien, he's on Earth, he has his ideas of what's right and wrong, and humanity has different ideas, and he doesn't quite get it. Like, he has all power, he hasn't really taken the time to sit down and think about what his mission is, what he's going to do. I think that's what Man of Steel was supposed to be, but Man of Steel didn't really do that. Instead, there was destruction, and so
I think Man of Steel was better than this, but
I don't think Man of Steel was that great, and so I think that that should be said. I liked Batman vs Superman, didn't think Man of Steel was that great, and however, I got a better sense of what Zack Snyder was trying to say about Superman in this film than I did in Man of Steel.
So how do you feel about this? We don't need to spend too much time on this because I want to get back to what you thought was good and bad about the movie.
Yeah.
But one of the things that is present in Man of Steel that maybe one of the reasons this movie kind of like bludgeons people over the head with stuff is because there's a lot of subtle things in Man of Steel about Superman and how his character is developing that people like just miss, and so they make like really broad pronouncements, and you're like, well, actually, if you watch the movie, and they're like, shut up, I watched the movie, and you're like, okay, I'm sorry that. One of the things that's present in there is that Krypton, right, is basically run like a very platonic utopian republic.
Yeah.
Like you can tell that like they're obviously great, and maybe that comes from the comic books as well, where they just kind of. But that's a very present thing, is that Krypton was this utopian place that was driven by strength and power in military.
Right.
Like it was basically a fascist state.
Right.
That also valued science, and like they don't hide that. Like that's kind of what the introduction is about. And Krypton as a character in Man of Steel is huge to the rest of the movie. And later in the movie, when there's this one scene when Clark is getting kind of bullied and is thrown against the fence, and then like he stands up and you see that he's like, you know, gripped whatever was holding so much that it ruined it. Like he's reading Plato's Republic in that scene.
Yeah.
And so it seems like one of the points of Man of Steel is that Clark is trying to learn and understand like right and wrong and how problems are solved, but he's actually coming from this very specific utopian model. So especially because when he goes to his dad, and his dad teaches him all about Krypton, like when he goes to the Fortress of Solitude, his dad's teaching him about Krypton, and so Clark goes in there and he learns about society and everything from an alien from the planet Krypton. And so to me, that's why it makes sense that like Clark is having a hard time understanding why humans don't get what he's trying to do.
So, I mean, a lot of criticisms have been kind of pointing that this film has a very cynical, pessimistic view of humanity. And if you're coming at it from that point of view, like that's probably intentional, because Earth would essentially be a fallen state compared to Krypton. But that ties into my idea that we talked about before, how I think this film works best if you think of it like a Greek epic poem. And so that these characters they're not just like typical characters. And so I'm gonna compare them to the Marvel characters, because the Marvel universe has always been very character driven, character centric, and the films have done a good job of doing that. Like if you tried to describe Tony Stark or Peter Parker, like you could do it. You could describe them as individuals. Whereas if I asked you to describe Clark Kent, like you'd be like a journalist who's also Superman. Like that's it. Like he doesn't have a defined personality the way that Peter Parker does. And I think that's important, because that's essentially what the difference between Marvel and DC is. Marvel's characters are superheroes with very human qualities, and DC's characters are gods.
Yeah,
who don't really get that. And if you read the old, like the Iliad and the Odyssey, like the characteristics of the gods are very detached from the human characters.
Yeah,
and they make these rash decisions, and they do these things kind of like out of their own id, and it just causes chaos. Like that's essentially all of Greek mythology in a nutshell, and that's kind of DC's mythology, or at least Zack Snyder is trying to say, if these characters were really this powerful, this is the chaos that they would create. And this movie is chaos.
Right.
And it's chaos because it's these two titans that are going head to head, and they're being manipulated by by Lex Luthor or whatever. But the whole point is that if they clashed, what would happen?
Right. And I think that's a very interesting part about this, is that like a lot of myths in general, the point of the story is not to be good in a modern conventional sense.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so, and I say this with like all due respect, that like one of the reasons that the Marvel movies are so successful is because they are very innocuous.
Yeah.
You know, it's like they do not alienate the audience at all. In fact, it's like very conscious that when Marvel makes a movie, they want to be as inclusive as they can to kind of everybody. I'm not talking about inclusive like racially or gender. Like they obviously
right,
still have plenty to do on that front. I'm talking about being inclusive in that they don't want to be alienating. They don't want to make their audience uncomfortable.
They don't want it to be challenging.
They don't want to be challenging. Yeah. And maybe that'll change with Civil War, because I think that looks interesting.
Right.
But even when you talk about Captain America, Winter Soldier, like it kind of inched in that direction, but it still refused to be legitimately cynical about certain things.
Right.
Because that's what people apparently really want from superhero movies. Like, even though I grew up reading a lot of very cynical comic books that were very dark and said a lot of nasty things about human nature, I didn't turn out some sort of sociopath who is convinced that the world... It's just that the dark recess of our imagination is there, and so I always enjoyed kind of playing around with that. And so the reason I think that this plays into that is because Batman vs. Superman is not concerned with being innocuous. It's not concerned with not alienating its audience. It's actually kind of actively trying to alienate its audience, which I find invigorating.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think a good example would be Iron Man 3. That movie actually is kind of challenging because it brings up ideas of Tony Stark experiencing PTSD. But then by the third act, it just throws that all away, and it just ends with a bunch of Iron Men. Mm-hmm. And then, spoiler, at the end of the film, he gets rid of all of his Iron Man suits. But then the next movie is Avengers 2, where he's Iron Man again, and he has all the Iron Man suits. So, it had no point. It had no, there was no real stakes there.